Welcome, Dan Santoni, to Home is Where the Dark Is. Thank you for coming by, man. How are you?
All right, man. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So yeah, I've been following your career for a while, and I've seen your photography all over the place, and I really like the new video you did for Mark.
Yeah.
And like working with Unreal and like all the stuff you've done for like these different fantastic shows and films. So my first question is, when you're doing like CGI and stuff for all these TV shows, do you start sketching things out first? Do you get into software right away? Like what is like the starting point for something like that?
I mean, it really depends on the scenario and what the media is that we're working in. If some of the stuff I've worked on, the larger films, for instance, there's a huge team. One of the companies I worked for back in the day, Rhythm and Hues, there were hundreds of us. So at that point, it's like an assembly line. Each one of us doing our own part. By the time it would get to me, I'd be in lighting or rendering right before compositing, dealing with actually integrating any of the CG characters or anything done in CG to seamlessly tie into live action footage. So by the time it would get to us in that pipeline, everything would already be laid out. Some of the other stuff I do, like the latest project I'm doing with Mark and with Seven Dials, the thing I love about that is it's not a gigantic budget like some of those films, but it's smaller in that there's freedom to do essentially almost anything you want. And with that, that's where it would be more like, okay, I need to plot out my own concept, my own way of tackling each situation. And, it's a mix. Sometimes I like to plot some of it out, sketch some of it out. Sometimes I just love freeform. And the one thing I've really come into lately with that is my love for Unreal Engine. Over all the years I've been doing CG, a lot of it was done with way back in the day, Softimage, with Maya, with Houdini, all of them, which I love. But Unreal just takes everything and sort of almost like zips it together, not essentially completely in one program, but so much of it you can do within Unreal itself. And also being a photographer, it really makes me feel like I'm looking through the lens and lining up all my shots on my own. So I've really fallen in love with it in that way.
Awesome. Can you explain, just for the listeners and for me too, because I have a vague idea of what it is, but can you explain what Unreal Engine is?
Well, to my knowledge, it began in the gaming industry, like we were talking earlier. It has slowly seeped in to other forms of work, which actually really good examples on a larger scale would be something like The Mandalorian. There's actually footage out there on YouTube of them shooting on set live, and instead of using green screens or blue screens, which can be tedious, you get a lot of blue or green spill onto the people on set, which later compositors have to remove or compensate for. Unreal, they're tying it in with those LED screens, and they actually do sort of a pre-viz, post-viz at the same time, which is then shown on the LEDs and actually helps light and sync whoever's on set in seamlessly.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. They call it the volume.
The volume. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's just one application, and you do everything inside of it. Is AI integrated with it yet, or no?
Parts of it are. I tend to try and do as much as I can manually, which is most of it actually. One thing that I do enjoy doing, which I think kind of comes into all the past work I've done, is a lot you can do within the package itself, but if you get into hardcore like modeling or animation, you actually have to start with one of those old school packages like Maya or Houdini. Maya often for modeling and animation. You do in Maya and then export it into Unreal, and then from there take over, with your lighting, with setting up your shots, with the rendering. Houdini, on the other hand, you end up doing a lot of those like very complex particle systems, which in my opinion, Unreal just isn't there yet. So with that really in-depth hardcore stuff like VDBs, atmospherics, those are done in Houdini and then imported in Unreal, and then you kind of just blend it all together in there.
Gotcha. So you're using like 2 to 3 softwares simultaneously most of the time for different stuff, like for different projects?
Yeah.
Like bouncing between them?
Yeah, I would say like 90% Unreal and then 10% the other packages.
Gotcha.
But it's good to know how to import and export, and also have an understanding of file extensions, understanding what can actually be imported into Unreal. So it's good to actually come from a background, again, where you kind of understand how a pipeline works.
Are you working at like super high resolution when you're doing your stuff, or do you work at a lower resolution and then export it at high resolution later? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's normally the way to work. It always has been over the years as well, working in post-production. The logical way is to try and sort of block the shots out first at a low resolution. Get everything as tied in as you can in regards to your animation, modeling, lighting, effects. And then when you're ready to go for final rendering, then you start going to a higher resolution.
Gotcha. Yeah, because like even I noticed for like the basic editing I do, like I've edited some music videos that were shot on a red, and I'm like, at the time, the computer I had, like I couldn't edit the red footage because it's just too fucking massive. I basically just edited the lower res footage, and then I sent it to my buddy Vicente, and then he did it on his computer with the red, and took my edit and then converted it to the red, and then we exported it that way, because like the files are just too massive, and my computer was like not able to handle it. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like when you're working in really high res, like high processing power, like type of applications, I would imagine Unreal is like takes up an insane amount of power and RAM.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. When I first started getting into it, I had to replace my machine at the time because it couldn't handle it or keep up with it.
Yeah.
It, on the other hand, works really quickly compared to some other software. You can do things in it so much more faster than anything else. I worked with like Maya or Houdini, which I love. But yeah, it's like every single software out there, it just, as technology advances, as the machines get faster, as you can do more effects, people want more on top of it. So it kind of balances itself out.
Right.
Where, yeah, you can work a lot faster, but now it's like with the desire to have more, you end up with like long render times, you know, just like you used to. But I will say, so far, even upping the resolution, the sampling, Unreal's been way faster than the other engines for rendering.
That's great. Are you, do you prefer Mac or PC?
Well, you know, honestly, I don't really hold a grudge on either. The only thing is when I started getting into particularly post over photography, post work, all of it was originally on SGI Silicon Graphics machines. Okay. But then when those phased out, then it was primarily PC. Mac back in the day when it started could hardly do anything with it. So I just kind of stuck with PC over time.
Yeah.
Talk about getting back with like, you know, also having space and capacity for high resolution renders. Yeah. Everything just gets bigger and bigger with the output, and the file sizes get larger and larger. So even the photography work, it's insane. I need more and more drive space. Yeah. You know, like even those are taking more and more room with the larger images and, you know,
I know, right?
Resolution.
Yeah. And now, like, you know, 4K is pretty standard now. So it's like, I know there's, you know, people doing like up to 8K and shit, but it's like when what's the highest you've exported out?
Rendering, probably 4K. Yeah. I've dealt with some 8K textures on objects and on models, but probably 4K. And I know, it's just going to keep going up and up over time.
As the technology gets faster, as the chips get better and the computers get faster, then it's like, okay, well, we can do more in the software. So let's just keep pushing the boundary. So it's like, even though the technology is getting better, like then the software gets crazier. So it's just constantly chasing that.
Absolutely. That's like getting back to, like I was saying too, more detail equals more render time.
Yeah.
You know, so it keeps kind of going in this crazy circle.
what's the slowest or the longest render you've ever done that comes to your mind that it's just like driving you crazy?
Oh, geez, man. I mean, that probably goes back to like the 90s, actually. There were a few things that you really had to pull teeth to like get realism out of, you know, and I would say like, I don't remember. It was something like a couple days for like just a frame.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy
So,
shit.
you know, and that's just a frame and like a small render. So imagine like, you know, I think it was like Mortal Kombat 2 I was working on, some of the stuff I did back then. And yeah, it was so funny because so many of those machines, you know, your SGIs, I had a buddy that bought like 3 of them back in the 90s, each one for 50 grand. And it was ridiculous. And then like a year later, they were like paperweights. And the render farms were insane, you know, oxygens and octanes. Some of these things costing like $500,000.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's so funny how things have changed.
Yeah, it's depressing, you know, especially because it's like you want to be on the cutting edge if you're doing this stuff professionally, like, you know, most of us want to have, or if we can swing it, we want to have like the best cutting edge stuff. But, you know, it's also scary because, you know, it's going to be obsolete in like a year or 6 months or whatever. So it's like, yeah, you got to be careful with that because, like, yeah, you can lose a lot of money. But,
tell me about it, man.
But I mean, it's part of the job, you know. It's like as long as you can get our work done, it doesn't. That's another thing I wanted to ask you too. It's like it doesn't matter what tools you use as long as you get, you know, the final result is what you want.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so you don't have to have like the most recent cutting edge everything as long as you're delivering the goods. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so old school. I still have my own old original darkroom enlarger and some of my old school film cameras.
Oh yeah.
So
Fuck
I mean, yeah, that was like back in the 90s in Detroit. I was shooting before I came here to LA. And, you know, I never wanted to give that stuff up. I still have all that equipment. But, you know, eventually it's been having to adapt over and over. So the cameras I had, which were film, became digital, which then, like you're saying, it's like each iteration of cameras, they become obsolete just like computers do. And it's crazy, you know.
I try not to spend too much money on like a new laptop. I always wait a couple of years or like a new machine or a new whatever, because I know it's like, yeah, everyone wants to get the new release, but I usually I'll wait a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years, and then I'll pay for it new, but it's like half the price. Like at this laptop, it's a 2022 or something, and it's an M2 chip. But I remember when they came out, they were like maybe 2,000, and I got it for like $800. But it's brand new and it works great. It's just not the newest one, right? You know. So I kind of try to do stuff like that in audio at least. But so okay, give us an idea of like what was it like to work on before you're saying on these big productions it's like an assembly line. So what was it like working on Game of Thrones, like designing, like doing the dragons, and like give us like an example of that process?
Okay, so back then that was when I was at Rhythm and Hues, and I think at that point it was version 3.0. I had worked with them previously when they were in, what was it, Playa del Rey, where we worked on Golden Compass, and I worked on that one as well, which we won awards for. By the time Game of Thrones came around, it was a much smaller group locally in LA. There were probably about, I don't know, I'm guessing around 20 of us. We also were partially owned by a team in India, which they also supplied some work, but most of it was like the tracking roto. They were doing crowd simulations in Houdini. What we did on Game of Thrones was we did work with the dragons, but it was on one particular episode per season that was like one of the hardcore episodes. I think it was 5, 6, and 7, those seasons. And we ingested the dragons from another company, just like we did on other shows like Walking Dead. That was handed off left and right. Everybody worked on that show. But we'd ingest the dragons. It'd go through modeling update, texturing, clean up the model. It would get to animation and us and lighting. And it was awesome. I mean, it was kind of hard working for the producers. They were very, very strict, especially by the last year we worked on it. They had us bracketing shots like it was insane and just kind of going over and over till it finally was approved. But it was beautiful, man. I loved the work that we did on that show. It was a great moment.
Yeah, it's definitely like very gorgeous imagery for sure. And so like how for your process in that, like how long does that stuff take? You know what I mean? Like once you get the edit and then you do your overlays on that and you do your rendering, like how long does that kind of a process take, like from start to finish?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, for the bidding. However much we bid for will then allocate how much each department has time-wise to work on each shot. So again, in lighting, by the time it got to me, I mean, I can't remember precisely. We were probably on it for a few months, but we did a whole series of shots. So it's, it'd go through. We'd ingest the plates if there were any. One thing that became complicated was if there wasn't any live action, they'd split the work up in such a way that, especially the last couple seasons we worked on it, the backgrounds would be done overseas.
Okay.
We'd be working on the dragons in the foreground. Gotcha. When we were lighting the dragons to match what was on set, where they have the chrome and gray spheres on set that somebody holds up, and it shows you the direction of the light and the reflection of the sky in the set. By the time we'd get the backgrounds from the company overseas, they completely ignored what was on set. So we'd have to redo half the time everything we did on the shots to then match the new background. And often we were ahead of the team working on the background. So that would affect us and make us change our work, which is kind of tedious.
So once your process is done, is the color grading in the CG or is that separate?
So we try to match as best we can what's on set, again, lighting direction-wise as well as color. But then it goes from, when you're that split up into categories and departments, from lighting it then goes into compositing. And compositing's the department that definitely, like, to the best of their ability, tries to take everything, take the models that are now lit, take effects like dust and debris being kicked up on the ground, maybe fire, although the fire was actually practical. They shot that on set, which was really sweet to see. They actually had this like rig that spat out the fire, and it was on a crane, like they're using cameras, and it was spitting that out. It's so sweet to see. Yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, the compositors are the ones that try to seamlessly get it all to match. And then once it goes through compositing and that's approved, then that's sent off to the colorist that, or the clients that will then change this color, which honestly, sometimes you're like, what the hell happened?
Obviously there's been, from your comment you just made, there's been times where like after you've done your work, the hues and the colors are like super different than what you did, right? Like
sometimes, not all the time, but I remember, for instance, Walking Dead was always an issue. It was I ended up doing a lot of those shots where there was a CG tiger in another episodes. That looked really good. I mean, it came out good in the end, but the first time the tiger was introduced, it was at San Diego Comic-Con. So we did a couple shots for that, and they introduced it there. And when we saw what was released at Comic-Con, they had taken what we did, and it was just like oversaturated. So where the tiger looked much more realistic, by the time it got through their hands, it was kind of like fluorescent in some areas, and it was kind of like this. But Yeah, sometimes it comes out for the best. Sometimes, it might get muddied down where you have something nice and contrasty. Then all of a sudden it turns muddy, and same situation. You wonder what happened. But
Yeah.
it's all up to the client.
Right. Yeah. It's like you can only have so much control over the stuff. You know what I mean? Unless you're working on a project where you're fully in creative control. All the things that have to go perfectly just to get to the final product, and of course it doesn't go perfectly, but you know what I mean? It's like it's just a miracle that these things like are produced. There's just so many moving parts.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last number of years, things like Marvel films ended up like infiltrating the industry, and those things are nuts. Like 1 million VFX shots, underbidding. Which caused a number of issues. So, whereas we've gone through in the past COVID and then the strikes, the post-production industry still has not come back properly because of those strikes. A lot of people, I think, and I understand why there was a strike, but didn't understand how many people would be affected by it. That and all the underbidding for things like Marvel shows, companies were underbidding so much that they were losing profit.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, have the budgets shrunk? Are you seeing the same kind of numbers for this work, or after the strike and like COVID, have things changed?
I think it hurts quite a lot. And another issue too, in regards to LA and Hollywood specifically, one thing that's really kind of sad in my opinion, and I always thought this, I've seen articles lately that kind of reflect my thoughts, where you have all these cities across the country, you have all these houses outside of the U.S. that offer the tax incentives, where they get a kickback, companies get kickbacks for filming in those areas. Well, in my opinion, I think Hollywood was so probably egotistical about everything, thinking, oh, we're Hollywood, we don't need to do that. Since the strikes and a few things coming back, they're not coming back here. They're coming back in Canada. They're coming back overseas, where those incentives still are. So there's things all over the net right now about, is Hollywood the next Detroit, and, the automotive industry, but the film industry, and which is kind of ironic because I come from Detroit. But.
Oh, yeah? Were you born there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like, it's a lot more productions are going out of state, which makes sense. I mean, if you can save money, I mean, obviously,
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just, that's a whole nother conversation. Like
yeah, it is.
The insanity of what Los Angeles has become. Like, how many years have you been in LA?
I left Detroit for here in '94.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I've been here my whole life basically, and I've seen the changes, like the slow, gradual like decline of Los Angeles. You could be in pretty much any state and still, like, if you're just getting into film or music, like, you can shoot films anywhere. You can make music anywhere. It's just about who you're networking with. Like, if you're really deep in the industry in entertainment or music and you have to be in LA or New York or Nashville or wherever, then that makes sense if you're working with those people. But if you want to like get started, you could do it pretty much anywhere. And it's interesting to me, like, how many people are still like just dying to move here. And it's like, dude, you're gonna, unless you're sitting on money and like from some other, you're born into money or whatever, you have money, like, okay, but yeah, it's brutal, man. So what have you noticed about, your industry? I mean, let's shift to photography here, because I mean, entertainment, it's all intertwined, but there's specific differences and nuances with like these specific fields. And then you're not only in film, but you're in photography. So tell me a little bit about like what have you noticed about the industry, like the major changes like since you've been in LA?
Oh, wow. Well, again, I've been at it a really long time. I started shooting in the 90s in Detroit, came here in 94. Still have my old school and larger, all the old equipment, film cameras, switched to digital. So it's not just LA, but it's that length of time. There's been a big drastic change where, back when I started doing that, as well as CGI, there was barely anybody doing it. So to stand out, it was much easier. To be relevant and to be seen was much easier. Now, with technology, things are easier and easier to pick up or easier to learn. Half the time, you don't even really need to learn it. Like, photography, for example, you don't need to learn how to develop anything in a dark room. You have things like Photoshop, which, yes, I'm savvy in, and I had to learn. If I didn't, I would have been left behind. But, on top of that, then you have all these plugins. Then you have all these other things where it's a lot of people don't even essentially know how to shoot, but they get it on their computer and let the software make it look like they know what they're doing.
Right.
So that can be awkward and also causes oversaturation of things out there in competition, which brings down prices, which brings down, budgets. Then you also have, Lord forbid, AI now. Who needs a actual photographer or a camera? You can just have AI pretend like you did a photo shoot. It's crazy. It's still my love, probably more than the post-production. It's what I grew into. I still love the interaction. My favorite thing to do is to work on set with a team, hair, makeup, wardrobe. I tend to, if I'm building sets, build the sets on my own. I might pull a couple people in to help me. But I love that too. And I love doing like portraiture and conceptual portraiture and really trying to get to know the individual in front of the lens that I'm shooting and sort of bring out their essence of who they are. Really make it unique and special and cater to who they are.
And when you say you like to get to know your subjects, like how do you get to know your subjects?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. If you're in the same town, it's great to hang out, maybe meet up for a drink or some coffee and talk ideas. Yeah. Now it's like if they're national or international, along with remote work, you have the Zoom chat rooms or Google. It's great to chat online and sort of face-to-face see them and see kind of how they react to things that they're discussing, see the excitement in their eyes. I always, again, especially if it's long distance, try to, talk ideas, get a general idea of what the concept's going to be. And then I look up reference on my own and send that to them. And I also encourage them to do the same. Whatever influences them, whatever they find fascinating in life and motivates them. I want to hear about it, and the more I know, the more I can really build upon what we're shooting. To me, that's what still makes it special and unique compared to no matter, what kind of software you're using or AI to finish the job. It's still unique in that it's about them.
I love that. Yeah, because, I've worked with quite a few photographers in my time and videographers, and like some of them are very like hands-on and very like, I want to know you, and some of them are very like reserved and in the background, you know what I mean? Yeah, and they just kind of show up and they show up, shoot, and fuck off. Yeah. Which everyone has their ways, which I'm cool. Like, I'm cool with whatever, man. Like, there's so many different ways to make art. And, as long as, like, the final product is what you want and the client had a good time and everyone had a good time, then, like, I don't care how it's done. You know what I mean? But I like that you take, take interest in your subjects. So photography is your first love. How do you feel like, I know we talked about AI a little bit, but it does seem the future seems a bit unknown in that regard, because like I'm still kind of I'm kind of undecided on AI. I see how it can be helpful, but I think in creative arts, it can make things a bit difficult, because like as a photographer, it hurts to know that someone can just kind of go into Photoshop or whatever app they're using and then just go generate, like, you can upload a photo of yourself, and then you could like generate around it or enhance it, and then can put yourself pretty much anywhere in the world. You can put yourself in any situation, like depending on how you code the prompt and stuff. So for me, I'm still kind of not sure about it, because for audio, it's a bit different.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult because I think about this stuff all the time.
Does it bother you?
What, AI?
Yeah.
I mean, it does. At first, I was really irritated.
Yeah, me too.
You know, coming from being an actual film photographer and not digital, part of me feels like, being a purist. I can see, kind of like you said, I can see as using aspects of it as a tool. But to solely do 100% like AI, and it drives me crazy when I see people online say, this is my art, and it's an AI image, and they don't claim that it's that. I mean, that's too much to me. I think if you use it as a tool, I think, Chat GPT, things like that are interesting and constructive for maybe putting together business plans, pitch decks, things like that. But 100%, I just, no. I don't. Yeah, I
feel the same way with you there. There's this like, I use it in Photoshop for like small things, like where you can say you have like a weird piece of an image that you just can't you can't smooth out perfectly, or you're having trouble with something. Like I do like the generate tool.
Yeah.
You just like select an area and then you don't even have to type anything in the prompt. You just generate, and it just smooths shit out like automatically. I'm like, oh, that's useful. Like stuff like that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like just purely generating stuff from nothing and then claiming it to be yours.
Well,
it's a lie, first off, because it's pulling it from who knows where. It's someone else's
absolutely
art,
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that kind of irritates me to an extent is, I had a photography major. I couldn't have had a computer effects major because back then it didn't even exist as a program that you could take in college. But, I got a bachelor in photography, but also in fine arts. I learned how to draw, how to paint, how to, do engravings, all sorts of things. I really feel that ideally, I wish that some of the kids out there and some of the people out there that are using AI and claiming it's their work, that they actually had that kind of a rounded knowledge and a background, at least, that they can do it on their own. I feel like a lot of people just don't even have that, and they start jotting down words, and it's frustrating. It's nice that people can get these things and these ideas out of their head that they weren't capable of showing that in any other way, but all the other stuff I said holds true too. It's just, I feel like people really need to learn other mediums.
So in Unreal, like when you just mentioned drawing, can you go in, or maybe do you start in like a different software? Because I know like with graphic design, like people they start, they'll go in Illustrator and like sketch something up and then like expand on that, then digitize it and make it super like perfect. You know what I mean? Is that kind of how can you start that way in Unreal, and then build off of a sketch, or do you start with like an image and build off, like how does that work?
There's really a number of different ways it can work. It's really kind of open-ended, I believe. I feel that, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's not, in my mind, something that you use 100%. Okay. It's basically definitely something where you take the best of everything, throw it together in the melting pot, mix it up, and then, spit it out in one form or another. A lot of the elements that you create, some can be in there, but a lot of it can also be done in Maya, like I mentioned, with modeling, animation, texturing. Houdini, a lot of effects, VDBs, very complicated systems, nebulas, tornadoes, whatever it might be, which you then import into Unreal and put together. Unreal's getting more robust as time goes on, but it's really not a complex modeling tool. Niagara, I think it's okay with effects, but coming from a film background, Houdini's like way ahead. I think, again, it depends on how you work. So some people might sketch out everything ahead of time, which I could see doing in another program, or in Unreal, maybe blocking shots out with very primitive objects.
Okay.
As opposed to the full-on 3D models with a million polys each. So you can block things out in a simple way there and start that way. But yeah, it depends on how you work too. And sometimes I like to block things out personally ahead of time. And then sometimes I love it because it is such a melting pot of everything and you can move very quickly. You can set up shots very quickly in sequencer, different cameras with different camera moves, line up the shots back to back. It's beautiful in that way, and it's so just free flowing. So sometimes I kind of get caught up in just going, okay, I'm just going to start pulling stuff out of my head and just randomly doing it to see what I get. You know, like I don't know if that fully answers your question, but
yeah, it did. I think I just need to look at it just go online and see it being used, and I'll understand more of like the process of it. You're pulling in, you know, different objects or different scenes that maybe you created in a different software, and then bringing it into it, and then like just expanding on it, like what you did with the 7 Dials video. I know you said it was partially Unreal, or is that other things as well, like mixing with that?
Well, I would say like 80% Unreal. Again, you know, going inside of Maya, maybe Blender, Houdini, outputting some models or some effects, then importing into Unreal. I laid out all the shots back to back in Unreal, put everything together there, rendered, and then spat that out to After Effects, and then did the final composite and edits in there.
Gotcha.
So, you know, I would say it's those 5 pieces of software that I used, but a huge part of it definitely is Unreal.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and how was that process working with Mark on his new project, 7 Dials? Because when I got to see your work at the event, it looks phenomenal, by the way. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Like, how was that process overall? Did they kind of give you like a story, like a storyboard of like kind of what they wanted, or did you just kind of give them some ideas, or how did that work?
I just went at it. I mean that, yeah. It was fun. I definitely, because I tend to think about psychological aspects again and depth to things. I don't like just randomly just throwing whatever I want out to the world and saying this is it. I actually kept looking at the lyrics and listening to the song a number of times over and over again. The lyrics written by Chris Conley of Ministry of Revolting Cogs, you know. I really wanted to make it about, you know, what he wrote about, you know. So that's where a lot of the imagery came from, were those direct lines in the lyrics. And actually that version that we showed at the 7 Dials release party was the first version of the video, which I did in about 3.5, 4 days, which to me is insane compared to, again, back in the day with Maya, Houdini. No way would it be done that quickly. But I'm working on a newer final version at the moment, which I hope to have done end of this week or next week. And then we'll probably air that online, I think in June.
Awesome. I'm always interested in, you know, behind the scenes stuff, but could you give us a story? Like, what was one of the craziest shoots you've ever been on, or shoots you've done where like something just out of the ordinary happened that you had to deal with? Because, you know, like working with different artists and bands, like as photographer, director, producer, like we all have been in these situations. So I'm just curious, like for you, like what's the first thing that like pops out of your mind, like one of the craziest shoots you've ever done?
Well, I guess like way back in the day, probably off the top of my head, was when I was shooting the Jenna Torturers, like, God, when was that? Late 90s, early 2000. But I saw them play in New Orleans for Halloween, and went up to Jen and showed her some work, and it's like, oh, this is great. You know, HIWTDI, David Vincent from Morbid Angel was in the band during that time. I went home after New Orleans, and a few days later, they're like, hey, can we fly you to Tampa to shoot? And I'm like, yeah, you know, sure. So within a week of New Orleans, I was down there, and that was bonkers. It was so fun, so funny. What I remember of it.
Oh, okay.
And then they sent me back on a plane back to LA. I think it was like a 5 a.m. flight. And they took me out to the castle in Tampa and kept me up till like 4. So I barely slept. And that was funny. Outside of the shoot, I always think about when I shot Sandy Carpenter and John Carpenter. John Carpenter, director of Halloween, The Thing, The Fog. And Sandy is the producer on many of his films, and they're married. Wonderful couple, but it's so funny because I don't really get starstruck, and I don't really care about approaching people. It doesn't, I don't get thrown off by it. But John, I definitely geeked out on.
And I bet. Hell yeah. I mean, iconic.
Yeah, and it was funny because outside of the shoot, mutual friends of ours, Steve Niles, who wrote 30 Days of Night, he was getting married at Vasquez Rocks. And after I shot Sandy and John, they showed up too. And I was there early to check out the location and figure out, what we're going to do in regards to shooting. And Sandy and John pulled up in a Jeep. They're like, nobody's here yet. Want a coffee? I'm like, sure. Now, before then, John and I kind of like went back and forth, and we're kind of joking around about things. So, I figured at this point it was like, okay, it's fine. They take off, they go to get coffee. Other people show up. They pull back up later, and the window rolls down, and John hands me a coffee, and he's like, here's your coffee. And I'm like, where's my fries with this? Like, I don't know. It was just, I don't know how much he liked that, but yeah, those guys are funny. The thing about him too that's really cool is when we were talking about film leaving LA, we got on the subject of filming in Atlanta, and he was just going off. Like, he's like, I'd been to Atlanta, I've dealt with the crews there, and no way LA crews are, way better, and just, so him and Sandy really stand by LA, which is cool.
I love that. What have you noticed, like, once you started working with, the bigger artists and, like, the people that you've been admiring for years, like, did you notice a change, or was it just like any other day?
I think it's a little mix and match. I mean, I think some of it definitely was just another day, and I think that's how some of them were. And sometimes too, you think somebody perhaps is like the music or the film work or whatever. There's so much depth, and then sometimes it's kind of like, okay, maybe it's not what I thought. But then on the other hand, there are some moments where there are some people that are way more in depth and way more well-rounded and amazing that you never would have realized.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's happened to me as well. Like there's been people I've met where you kind of put people on a pedestal, like they're so amazing, like they've done so much great work, and then you meet them and you're like, oh, yeah, And it's like a lot of it is it's like smoke and mirrors. Like it's just kind of like it's all hype, and then there's some people that you don't think they're going to be as impactful on you, but then when you meet them, you're like, holy shit, I had no idea, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think about all the people I've met and dealt with over the years. Like back in the 90s, I was working on an art magazine and interviewed a ton of people back then, some of which I shot later, but all the interviews I did, it was like Killing Joke, Ministry, Primus, Fishbone, Diamanda Gallis, a huge list of all these people. It was that when I first started noticing that, where it's like, okay, some of these people were just very bland, where you wouldn't expect that. But two people I remember interviewing that you look in their eyes and you feel like there's something there that's beyond like just them and just what's in that skull, is Jazz Coleman, the singer of Killing Joke, and Diamanda Gallis. And those two, I mean, you talk about like possessed by something bigger and larger. Jeez. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it, because I feel like there's certain people that when you talk to, whether you want to call it like their aura, their charisma, their muse, whatever, but there's something more to them. Like there's like an energy surrounding them, like wherever they go, that's like kind of larger than life, like ethereal, kind of godly almost. It's like, wow,
yes,
definitely. It's a feeling, but yeah, I've experienced that with some people, but yeah, like I totally understand what you're saying there. I mean, you've done so much work up to this point in your career. Like you've had a very long career. Like what are some of your most proud moments or like projects, like something that because you've done so many great things, but what is like the one standout thing that when you think about it, you're like, God damn, I'm so happy I got to do that, or I'm so proud of that. Like, and I'm sure you have a lot of them, but what's like, can you give us one?
Well, I guess in general, definitely the photography more than anything as a whole, because that's me and solely me. And some of those shoots in particular, if it's post-production, usually I always come back to working on Life of Pi. That was a huge moment in my life. It was a beautiful team. Wonderful people, but the thing was it was definitely one of those moments where we were working 24/7 for months. Barely slept, in the office till 3 a.m. Get back in it at like 9 because you have meetings.
Oh, fuck.
I was leading a lighting team, like 5 to 10 guys on some of the ocean sequences with the tiger and the main actor in the boat. And during all of that, I got hit. I was standing outside, didn't see it coming because it came from behind. I got hit by a shuttle bus, literally. And we're in the middle of huge, heavy deadlines. I'm leading a team. Bam, I get hit, go flying in the air, landed on my head, out cold. Apparently, from what I understand, what I heard, paramedics showed up, picked me up off the ground, and as they were picking me up, I came to and was supposedly lucid, but I don't remember any of this. And I was yelling and screaming obscenities. A buddy of mine rode in the EMS truck with me. He said I was irate about not being able to breathe, which was completely illogical. There was no reason for that, so they put oxygen mask on me. For the next hour or two, I don't remember anything. I think they put me through an MRI. I don't remember. First thing I remember was being in the emergency room, and one of the producers showed up, and Walter Garcia. Like, so many people were intimidated by him, But at first, he and I kind of butted heads. But I love the guy, man. It's like respected him so much. And at that point, he walked up. And I think because he started talking to me, that's where I started coming to. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I remember is a nurse standing behind me with her hands inside my head.
Oh,
and she's like, okay, your head's severely lacerated. I'm going to have to put metal staples in. This might hurt. I swear to God, it felt like out-of-body experience. I heard somebody laughing, which was me. Saying, oh, I bet that's going to fucking hurt. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, that's the first thing I remember. And then everybody's like, look, don't come back to work. Just take it easy. But I was so concerned and so worried about my team and everybody. I came back within a week, which was stupid. But
holy shit.
But
wow.
I think that just that whole thing is definitely.
So you were just out in front of the office,
No, I was at lunch.
Oh,
and I was standing. It was at a DoubleTree hotel. There's an entrance that's just off a parking lot, and I was in the entrance area, standing on the sidewalk ramp, which was off of the parking lot. But there was this old man who barely saw over the steering wheel, apparently, because he was short. Didn't see me and went up the curb and the ramp and,
Oof. Oh, my God.
So, I mean, photo shoots, too. There are so many things I've done that I love, Skinny Puppy, Ogre, Margaret Cho. I've done 3 shoots with her, which were beautiful. A lot of shoots I do are actually in my living room and I build sets out.
Oh, sweet.
I love doing that because I used to do art direction on set. I love practical sets, which I then embellish if I need to in post. But yeah, like one of the shoots I did with her, I created the outside of a circus tent and threw straw all over my living room floor, and that was fun.
Getting messy in your house.
Yeah, the last thing we did was, the last shoot I did with her was actually on location at a church in Koreatown that was just gorgeous, like gigantic. That was a lot of fun too.
What are some of the wildest locations shots you've done?
Probably going all the way back to when I first started, and I was in the photo department in Detroit. There was a building on campus. I went to Wayne State University downtown, and there was a building called Old Main, or I think it's still there, that courses were held in some of the rooms, but there were the building was huge, and there were parts of the building that just hadn't been touched in decades. And I remember I took a model, my friend Maria, her and I started getting into like the nooks and crannies and getting into areas that nobody had been in all that time at night. And I brought lighting gear, and we ended up in this area where it was like, it used to be an old locker room. And I remember there was a newspaper from like the 70s on the ground and just dirt and filth everywhere. We shot her there. And then I remember also, I don't remember why, but there was a fence with like these metal triangles. I took my shoes off, my shirt, wrapped myself in Christmas lights that were burning my skin, and I was climbing, doing self-portraits, and just, it was nuts.
Going crazy.
Yeah, but I used to miss that kind of stuff, that sort of guerrilla tactic, like get in, get out, like abandoned type areas.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that stuff. Like the
Me too.
Really old, worn down, like nasty, grimy shots. Fucking love that stuff.
I love that too, man.
Before we wrap it up, can you let us know, like, what are you currently working on, and what are you super excited about right now with your career?
Well, like we were talking earlier, I'm back in the video I did for 7 Dials, but adding some bells and whistles, kind of tightening up some shots, which I'm going to send to Mark end of this week or probably next week. And I think we're going to air it sometime in June. And then also, I've been working for a while on a business plan for a company that my buddy and I, actually a couple friends and I, are putting together, a very immersive event type thing that I'm super excited about. I think right now everything's in such a flux and is so chaotic in regards to, again, the film industry, people being out of work. It just feels like now's the time to start stepping into something different, taking all the knowledge I have in that background and utilizing it and pushing it into another realm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people are pivoting and figuring out, okay, how can I still do what I love but survive?
Absolutely.
While there's no work, or while there's not like the right work or not enough of it. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people that are so talented at what they do, but they're just struggling because of, times are tough, man, and especially here in LA, like it's like fucking brutal. It's brutal, but yeah, we got to pivot. Just got to do what we got to do to survive. So,
absolutely.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming by. It's been great to chat with you.
Yeah, and, thanks for inviting me, man.
Of course.
I really appreciate it.
So where can everyone hit you up?
Well, I got my site, dansantoni.com.
Okay.
There I've got some stuff on YouTube, Vimeo. Not Vimeo, but yeah.
Vimeo, yeah.
Yeah, I've got some of my CG stuff there, but definitely when this new video is finished and comes out, that's going to be everywhere. I can't wait to get that online.
Sick, man. Well, everyone go check out Dan's website. I'll put it in the description below. And if you need killer photos, hit him up. You do great work, man. And I really like Cold Chamber was one of my favorite bands. Like I was telling you before, like I love that photo set you did with them. Fucking love that one too. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.